Hello and welcome to Byju's Exam Prep. Welcome to the big news of the day. Before we begin, please note that we are going to start off the new year with a national scholarship test on the 1st of January to be held at 11 a.m., through which you stand to win a 90% scholarship on our IAS courses. So, those interested, kindly head to the description box below to register yourself for the upcoming scholarship test. So, with this, let's start with the big news for today. We are going to talk about the cough syrup deaths that have been reported in Uzbekistan, where more than 18 children have lost their lives, reportedly after consuming excessive doses of a cough syrup that is produced by an Indian pharmaceutical firm. So, yesterday, Uzbekistan's health ministry has reported these unfortunate deaths and has linked them with not just consumption of excessive doses, but has also pointed out that this cough syrup produced by an Indian pharma company was of a substandard quality, as investigations have shown contamination of these cough syrups with ethylene glycol, which is a toxic substance, as the consumption of such a cough syrup, especially by children, could lead to kidney failure and other acute cardiovascular conditions that could result in death. Now, this is where the topic becomes very important for India and also for our exams. This development in Uzbekistan is not a standalone incident. Just a few months back, a similar incident had been reported in the African country of Gambia, where more than 60 children lost their lives after reportedly consuming a cough syrup produced by another Indian pharmaceutical firm. Following this incident, Gambia had also placed the blame on the Indian drug, and the World Health Organization had also stepped in and had issued an alert for four contaminated Indian produced medicines. In fact, just a few days back, a parliamentary panel in the Gambia has submitted a final report after completing the investigation into these deaths. And the report says that unacceptable levels of diethylene glycol and ethylene glycol were found in these cough syrups produced by Indian companies. So these back-to-back developments that have been reported in the Gambia and in Uzbekistan is of importance for India on two grounds. One, this could affect India's image as the pharmacy of the world and as the world's largest supplier of generic drugs and vaccines. And two, these incidents, if found to be true, raises serious questions about drug standards and the drug regulatory framework in India. So let's focus our discussion on these two important topics which are relevant for our exams. See, India prides itself in being the pharmacy of the world, as India produces the world's largest volume of generic drugs, which is essentially unbranded life saving drugs to many developing and poor countries across Africa and Asia. India is also one of the world's largest producer of essential vaccines. And this is not just a key component of Indian exports, but it has also become a critical component of Indian diplomacy as India leverages the strength of its pharma industry to supply generic drugs and vaccines to poor developing nations in order to build India's soft power image. Many nations across Africa, Asia, and other parts of the world are so dependent on India for these essential drugs and vaccines that it has placed India in a unique position where Indian companies and India in general plays a critical role in the healthcare sector of these countries. For example, India is said to be the backbone of Africa's healthcare, as India supplies low cost generic medicines to Africa, and nearly 45% of all generic medicines that is imported by African nations is sent by India. According to reports, 20% of India's 17 billion pharma exports is bound towards African nations. Over the last decade, India's pharmaceutical exports to Africa and the rest of the world has more than doubled and reached $24.5 billion as of 2021. Even during the COVID 19 pandemic, we saw how India engaged in vaccine diplomacy. And while the rich and powerful countries were stockpiling on vaccines, India would distribute vaccines free of cost and ensure timely supply of vaccines to many countries. Indian pharmaceutical firms, hospitals, and healthcare players have also invested heavily in Africa, and this makes India the backbone of Africa's healthcare sector. So, through such a robust pharma industry, and by rightly tapping lucrative markets through diplomacy, India has reached out to developing and poor nations to assist and support their healthcare sector while parallelly booming Indian exports. Over the last 8 to 9 years, India's pharma exports have grown exponentially by almost 146%, thus clearly establishing India as the pharmacy of the world. So, in many ways, these markets that India finds in Africa and other countries for its pharma exports is critical for the Indian economy and also for India's soft power image. But such incidents which are being reported in Uzbekistan and in the Gambia could deeply hurt India's image and could also take a dent on Indian exports of pharmaceutical products to other countries. This is where it becomes important to take a look at the drug standards that are enforced in our country. The drug regulatory framework is enforced by the Central Drug Standard Control Organization or the CDSO, which is headed by the DCGI or the Drug Controller General of India. The DCGI heads the pharma regulatory framework in the country, and the CDSO is the nodal organization to enforce drug standards. The CDSO, which falls under the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, regulates the quality, safety, and efficacy of drugs, including vaccines, as per the provisions of the New Drugs and Clinical Trial Rules of 2019 under the Drugs and Cosmetics Act of 1940. The organization also functions as the nodal authority for approving new drugs and clinical trials, and also lays down standards for drug control over the quality of imported drugs and even medical devices. While India does have a robust regulatory framework, what India really lacks is enforcement at the ground level, especially at the state level. There have been many small pharmaceutical companies which have been known to cut standards and bypass standard protocols in the hope of maximizing their profits. So it is absolutely essential for India and the state governments and the respective regulatory institutions to crack down on such companies which might be bringing a bad name to India and, more importantly, might be contributing to unfortunate deaths in other countries purely out of greed and incompetency. So, following these two incidents, India has responded proactively, and when the Gambia incident happened, India's CDSO immediately launched a parallel investigation and carried out a countrywide inspection of some of the drug producing factories in the country. Maiden Pharma, which had been accused of producing substandard cough syrups which were contaminated with ethylene alcohol, saw its manufacturing plants getting shut down by the CDSO, following which a thorough investigation was conducted by the Indian authorities. Recently, the government of India had informed the Rajya Sabha that the four cough syrups which had been flagged by WHO were found to be of standard quality with no contamination being reported in them. India's argument was these deaths in Gambia might have happened due to overdose or self medication as well, and there was no possibility to establish a one-to-one causal relationship between the consumption of India manufactured cough syrups and the deaths that had been reported in Gambia. While India was not looking to escape responsibility for the incident, it did seek out more data and information from the WHO and the concerned countries to take this investigation to a conclusive end based on scientific evidence. Even after the Uzbekistan incident, India has responded immediately and the CDSO has launched fresh investigations against these pharma companies. But these inspections alone may not be sufficient as India is going to face tough questions and challenges in the coming days. On one hand, Western countries have always blamed Indian pharma companies for not following the required sanitary and hygiene standards. While big India pharma firms have performed well in this regard, the concern is really with regard to the smaller and medium sized pharma companies, which may not be strictly regulated at the ground level by state level institutions. So, here the challenge for India is about protecting its image, that is, its soft power image, which has been carefully cultivated over decades through Indian diplomacy, while parallelly ensuring that India produced drugs do not result in any unfortunate deaths in other countries. So, India would be required to conduct transparent and honest investigations in coordination with WHO and the concerned countries and bring out the relevant information and ensure that if there has been any negligence on the part of these companies, strict punishment has to be dealt out to the guilty in order to retain the faith of other countries in India's pharma sector. On this note, I would like to conclude the discussion for today. And if you like the initiative, do support us by pressing the like button, share your comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching.